My family took me to Japan just to be their tour planner. At the shrine, my mom asked a local guide, "Can you thank our assistant?" I blinked. "Assistant?" She turned to me, smirking, "You don't think we brought you for you, right?" Last year, my mom, stepdad, dad, and his wife invited me to join them on a trip to Japan. I thought it was about reconnecting as a family. But when we were at a shrine in Kyoto, my mom laughed and told a local guide to thank our assistant. She meant me. I stood there realizing I wasn't invited to be with them. I was there to plan everything, fix every problem, and cater to them. I had been used, again. This is the story of how that trip and that moment made me step away from them for good. When my mom called me in the middle of a dreary January evening, I was half watching a documentary, the rain tapping against my windows. She sounded upbeat, almost giddy, which was rare. "We're planning a family trip to Japan," she announced. "Your dad, Corinne, Dennis, and me and you, of course." I sat up straighter, surprised. They hadn't planned anything together for years without it turning into an awkward competition. "It would be so special," she said. "Like old times before everything got messy." Old times, I thought grimly, weren't exactly a golden age. But part of me, the part that still wanted to believe families could heal, said yes. I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why I was so crucial to their plan. Instead, I spent the next few months helping them organize visas, explaining train passes, booking hotels, researching cultural etiquette, and suggesting must-see spots. It felt natural at first. After all, I was a travel consultant. But when we all met at Narita Airport, it hit me how little they'd done themselves. Dennis looked around in confusion. "All right, Soph," he said. "What's the plan?" And just like that, the pattern was set. Every morning they'd look at me, expectant. Every time we got lost, it was my fault. Every restaurant menu was handed to me to translate. Every hiccup, a delayed train, a miscommunication, was mine to solve. No one said thank you. Not once. In Tokyo, it was easy to brush off. I liked seeing new things. The city buzzed with life, neon lights reflected off rain-slicked streets. I told myself it was fine, maybe they were just overwhelmed. In Kyoto, though, it got harder to ignore. The slower pace exposed everything, the small complaints, the snide jokes. I realized they weren't relying on me because they needed to, they expected me to manage everything because they saw me as part of the service, like the GPS or the pocket Wi-Fi. The day it all came crashing down, we were visiting Fushimi Inari Taisha, climbing through the endless tunnels of Vermilion Gates. It was supposed to be a magical experience, and it was, at first. The mountain air was fresh, the smell of cedar and earth wrapped around us. I had been explaining to them patiently, as always, the significance of the shrine and the fox statues representing Inari. A local guide, friendly and smiling, approached to offer assistance. Before I could respond, my mom stepped forward, gesturing to me casually. "Can you thank our assistant for her hard work?" she said in slow English. I froze. "Assistant?" I turned to her, waiting for her to laugh and say she was joking. Instead, she smirked. "You don't think we brought you for you, right?" she said, almost affectionately, like she was explaining something obvious. Dennis chuckled, as if I had been silly to think otherwise. Corinne hid a smile behind her hand. My father just looked vaguely irritated, as if I was somehow making a scene by standing there, silent. In that moment, I felt something in me crack. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't even family. I was a convenience. I finished the rest of the shrine tour robotically, answering their questions in a hollow voice. Inside, I was burning. They hadn't brought me to share memories. They brought me because I could speak basic Japanese. Because I could book trains. Because I could make sure they didn't have to figure anything out for themselves. That night, lying on the futon at our ryokan, I stared up at the paper ceiling. I thought about every Christmas where I played mediator. Every Thanksgiving where I cooked alone while they drank wine and nitpicked the menu. Every birthday they forgot because they were too busy fighting each other. It was never about me. It had never been about me. In the morning, they were already waiting at the breakfast table, chirping about what Soph had planned for the day. They barely looked up when I sat down. I set my teacup down carefully. "I'm not coming with you today," I said. They all stopped talking. "What are you talking about?" Dennis asked, laughing like it was a joke. "You're adults," I said. "Figure it out." Maurice frowned. Corinne tilted her head like she was trying to hear better. "You're being selfish," my mother said sharply. I stood up. "No. I'm finally being selfish." And I walked out. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I just walked, the warm Kyoto air washing over me like a baptism. That day was the first time in my adult life that I had been completely free of them. I wandered aimlessly at first, but then found myself drawn to the philosopher's path. The stone walkway curved along a canal, lined with cherry trees just beginning to bud. I bought a matcha ice cream from a tiny stand. I sat on a bench by myself, feeling the soft hum of peace in my bones. For once, nobody needed anything from me. For once, I didn't have to explain myself. When my phone buzzed with angry texts accusing me of ruining the trip, of abandoning them, I turned it off. I spent the next few days alone. In Nara, I fed the sacred deer and laughed when one stole my map. In Hiroshima, I cried quietly at the Peace Memorial Park, reading the letters from survivors. In Osaka, I got a little drunk at a tiny izakaya where no one spoke English and no one cared who I was or why I was there. I was just a person, living. When my return flight date came, I didn't tell them. I checked into a separate hotel near the airport the night before, savoring the silence, the control over my own movements. On the flight home, somewhere over the Pacific, I stared out the window at the endless stretch of clouds and sky. I felt untethered. Part of me was terrified, had I just blown up my entire family relationship for good? Another part of me, the part that felt newer, raw but sturdy, whispered, good. When I landed in Seattle, it was late afternoon. The gray drizzle that had been so familiar all my life clung to everything. My apartment smelled faintly of lavender and old books when I stepped inside. I dropped my suitcase in the entryway and just stood there, listening to the hum of silence. No demands. No one barking my name from the other room. No tension crackling in the air, waiting for me to fix it. I didn't rush to text anyone. I didn't check if they had even gotten home yet. For the first time in, maybe ever, I let them deal with themselves. But the silence didn't last forever. 2 days after I returned, the emails started. The first one was from my mother. It was longer than I expected, but the tone was familiar, a delicate, weaponized hurt. Sophia, I don't understand what came over you. We included you because we thought it would be special. We wanted to make memories. Instead, you abandoned us in a foreign country. I'm embarrassed and disappointed. There was no mention of how they had treated me. No acknowledgement of the assistant comment. Just a masterclass in guilt tripping. I didn't respond. Then came a text from Dennis, more blunt, you really need to apologize to your mother. She's been crying. Followed by one from Corinne, I hope you realize how ungrateful you've been. Your dad paid for part of your ticket. We could have left you home. Left me home. Like a dog too unruly to take on a walk. I read the messages once. Then I archived them. I was tired, soul deep tired of defending myself against people who had never seen me as an equal, let alone as someone worth cherishing. That Saturday, Marcus called. My brother, who had been conspicuously silent through all this, finally reached out. He lived in Boston now, busy with a life full of people who actually cared about him. Hey, Soph, he said. You okay? I hesitated. Not really, I admitted. My voice cracked a little. He was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said finally. I know the feeling. And that simple acknowledgement, no demands, no guilt, no judgment, undid me more than anything else had. We talked for 2 hours that night. About how we had both spent our lives being useful instead of loved. About how easy it had been for them to twist the blade when we stopped performing the roles they needed. He told me he was proud of me. No one had said that to me, not sincerely, in years. In the weeks that followed, the storm kept raging on their end. There were more emails, voicemails filled with brittle concern, invitations to come over and talk it out like adults. Translation: apologize for making them uncomfortable. I didn't answer. Not because I hated them, but because I finally understood their version of love came with conditions I was no longer willing to meet. I started going for long walks after work, just breathing in the cool spring air. I took a pottery class on a whim. I let myself imagine a life where I wasn't bending into unnatural shapes to fit into someone else's expectations. Japan stayed with me too. Some mornings, when the sun hit my kitchen window just right, I remembered walking the philosopher's path. The sound of running water beside me. The cherry blossoms whispering overhead. The feeling that, even though I was alone, I was complete. And strangely, impossibly, I wasn't lonely. Not anymore. Summer crept in slowly, and with it came a strange, peaceful emptiness. Without the constant static of my family's expectations, my days stretched out like clean white pages. For the first time since I was a teenager, my time was actually mine. Some days, I didn't know what to do with all that space. I'd find myself pacing my apartment, feeling the itch to do something productive, to prove my worth to someone. But there was no one demanding anything from me now. And slowly, I started learning how to be still. I spent weekends exploring corners of the city I had never really noticed before. I found a tiny used bookstore tucked between a bakery and a bike shop, and the owner, a woman named June, remembered my name after one visit. I started attending a Sunday morning yoga class, where nobody cared if I could touch my toes or not. I even signed up for a short Japanese language course at the community center for myself this time, not for anyone else's convenience. Life wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet and ordinary, and for once, that felt extraordinary. Meanwhile, the emails and texts from my family grew less frequent, but more calculated. My mother shifted tactics, sprinkling in tiny barbs wrapped in sweetness. Your Aunt Renee was asking about you. She said she hopes you're not still upset over nothing. I saw a picture of Kyoto on Facebook today. It made me think of you. I hope you're not too busy to call your mother. Each message was like a tiny fishhook tossed into the water, waiting to snag me. I didn't take the bait. Marcus and I grew closer during this time, trading long, winding conversations about everything and nothing. He told me about the way he had pulled back from them years ago, how hard it had been at first. How guilty he'd felt and how free he eventually became. It's like detoxing from a drug, he said once. You don't realize how sick it made you until you're out of it. I understood that now. By late summer, it had been almost 5 months since Japan. I hadn't seen them once. Then, one afternoon, the inevitable happened. My mother showed up at my door. No warning, no text beforehand. Just a firm knock around 2 p.m. on a Saturday. I hesitated, frozen in my living room. She knocked again, softer this time. And then she called out. Sophia, honey? I just want to talk. For a long moment, I didn't move. My heart hammered against my ribs, all my old instincts screaming at me to open the door, to let her in, to smooth things over. Instead, I closed my eyes and breathed. When I finally answered, I cracked the door just wide enough to see her standing there, clutching a reusable grocery bag like some kind of peace offering. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. But her eyes sharp, assessing, hadn't changed at all. Can I come in? She asked. I hesitated just long enough for her smile to falter. I think I'd rather talk out here, I said quietly. A flash of irritation crossed her face before she smoothed it over. She pulled a container from the bag, homemade cookies, I realized, and held it out. I made your favorite, she said. I didn't take them. We stood there awkwardly, two women who shared blood but not much else. I miss you, she said after a moment. Her voice cracked the way it always did when she needed something. I believed her. I even believed she thought she missed me. But what she missed wasn't me. It was the role I played. The helper. The fixer. The dutiful daughter who kept the family machine running. I'm doing fine, I said, voice steady. I'm happy. She blinked, as if the idea of me being happy without them was somehow offensive. We were all stressed in Japan, she said, rushing now. Travel's hard on everyone. Maybe we said things we didn't mean. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever gotten from her. But even now, she couldn't say what had been said. Couldn't acknowledge that she had reduced me to an employee. Couldn't name the hurt she had caused. I know, I said. But I'm not ready to go back to how things were. Her mouth tightened. The mask slipped, just for a second. I don't know why you're being so stubborn about this, she said, sharpness creeping into her tone. Families fight. We get over it. That's what we do. Maybe that was true for her idea of family. But I wasn't part of that anymore. I shook my head slowly. Not this time. She stood there a moment longer, the container still dangling awkwardly between us. Then, with a stiff nod, she shoved it into my hands whether I wanted it or not and turned away. I watched her walk down the hall without saying goodbye. I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. I closed the door, set the cookies on the counter, and stood there in the silence, feeling relieved. More relieved than sad. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that grief and freedom could live in the same room, side by side. The container of cookies sat on my counter for days. At first, I ignored it, pretending it wasn't there. Then I moved it to the fridge, thinking maybe later, maybe when the sting had dulled. But every time I opened the door, it sat there like a quiet accusation, reminding me of what I was supposed to want. After almost a week, I threw it out without opening it. It wasn't an act of anger. It wasn't dramatic. I just realized, standing there in the kitchen with the fridge door open, that I didn't want anything given out of guilt, pity, or obligation. Not anymore. I was beginning to understand something about love. Real love wasn't transactional. It didn't come with terms and conditions. It wasn't something you had to earn by staying small and quiet and useful. And what my family had offered me all these years wasn't really love at all. It was need. And when I stopped filling that need, their affection vanished like mist. Summer faded into early fall. Seattle's trees burned golden red, and the air sharpened into something that smelled of rain and wood smoke. Life slipped into a new rhythm: work, long walks, quiet dinners with friends who made me feel light instead of burdened. Marcus visited one weekend. He brought his partner, Alan, a soft-spoken man with kind eyes, and the three of us spent 2 full days eating our way through the city, laughing over bad puns, drinking too much coffee. No tension. No guilt trips. Just easy, comfortable connection. Late Sunday afternoon, after Alan had gone to pick up coffees, Marcus and I sat on a park bench watching the sun slant through the leaves. You seem different, he said, nudging me with his shoulder. Better? I asked. He smiled. Yeah. Way better. I shrugged, feeling a little embarrassed, but a small warmth bloomed in my chest anyway. I think I just stopped trying so hard, I said. Stopped trying to fix something that was never really about me. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You know they're gonna keep trying, he said finally. Mom. Dad. Corinne. Dennis. They're not done. I know, I said. And I did. There was an inevitability to it, like a tide pulling at the shoreline. But I wasn't the same brittle girl anymore, building elaborate sandcastles just to have them knocked down. I could see the waves coming now. And I could choose not to stand in their path. A few weeks later, true to Marcus's prediction, another attempt arrived. This time, it was an invitation. A formal-looking card in the mail, thick ivory paper, Gold lettering announcing a family reunion Thanksgiving dinner at my father and Curran's house. Attendance, it said, was expected. There was a note scribbled at the bottom in my father's tight handwriting: Sophia family is family. Time to let bygones be bygones. We'll see you there. No question mark. No option. Just an order disguised as an expectation. I set the card down carefully on my kitchen table and stared at it. The old reflex, the one drilled into me since childhood, kicked in immediately. The urge to comply. To keep the peace. To prove that I wasn't the problem. But alongside it, something new stirred. Something steady and quiet. The question wasn't could I go. It was did I want to. The answer came, surprisingly easily, no. No, I didn't want to sit at a table with people who saw me as a tool. No, I didn't want to pretend things were fine because it made them more comfortable. No, I didn't want to perform gratitude for scraps of conditional affection. I took a deep breath. Picked up my phone. And this time, instead of ignoring it, I wrote back. I won't be attending. Please respect my decision. I wish you all well. I pressed send before I could second guess myself. And for the first time, I didn't feel dread afterward. I didn't imagine the angry calls or the passive-aggressive messages that would probably come. I just sat there, feeling a strange lightness settling into my bones. A life without them, or at least, without the version of them I had been clinging to, wasn't empty. It was open. Open to new traditions, new connections. Open to real love, the kind that didn't require me to earn my place at the table. Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it differently that year, not alone, not sad, but at a small Friendsgiving one of my yoga classmates hosted. There were 20 of us crammed into a little apartment, eating way too much pie, laughing until my sides hurt. There was no tension. No tight smiles. No feeling like I was failing at something invisible. When someone hugged me goodbye that night and said, "I'm glad you were here," I almost cried. Not because I was sad, but because it was the first time in a long time someone had been genuinely happy just for my presence. No expectations. No debt. Christmas came next, and for the first time in my life, I made no plans with my family. I spent it traveling instead, a solo trip down to New Mexico, soaking in hot springs, hiking through red rock canyons, sipping spicy hot chocolate under skies so wide it made me dizzy. My phone stayed mostly silent, except for one text on Christmas Eve from my mother: "Hope you're happy wherever you are. Merry Christmas." No guilt. No anger. Just a simple, resigned line. It was strange how powerful it felt to not respond. To realize that silence could be an answer too, not the sulking silence they used to weaponize against me, but a peaceful kind. A boundary, soft but firm. Months passed. Spring came again. One evening, Marcus called me, half laughing, half exasperated. "You won't believe this," he said. Turned out, our parents were planning another big trip, this time to Italy. Rome, Florence, Venice. And they had once again made grand plans without handling any of the actual details. And guess who they tried to rope into planning it? Marcus said, still laughing. "You?" I guessed. Bingo. Me. They sent me this massive itinerary outline, asked me to handle the logistics. Like I'm some unpaid intern. I couldn't help it, I laughed too. "What did you say?" I asked. I told them I'm busy. Too busy. Suggested they hire a travel agent. I smiled so hard it hurt. Apparently, they didn't take it well. They were scrambling now, complaining about how expensive everything was, how confusing, how much work went into planning a real international trip. It was petty of me, maybe. But hearing about their struggles felt like a balm on a wound I hadn't realized was still healing. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. It was justice. They were finally forced to confront the invisible labor they had taken for granted. And they were doing it without me. The real revenge, though, came later, not through any dramatic confrontation, but through living well. By early summer, I had launched a small independent travel consultancy, specializing in solo trips for women. I'd been dreaming about it quietly for years, but Japan and the aftermath had finally given me the push I needed. Word spread fast. Within months, I had a solid stream of clients, women like me, who wanted to see the world on their own terms. No one bossing them around. No one turning their joy into unpaid labor. One afternoon, I got an inquiry through my business site. It was Corinne. The message was painfully formal. "Hi Sophia, we heard you started a travel business. We're planning a trip next spring and we're wondering if you offer family packages. We'd be happy to pay your standard fee." I stared at it for a long moment. Not an invitation. Not a guilt trip. A request. Acknowledging, however reluctantly, my worth. For a few minutes, I considered it. I could have said yes, charged them my highest premium, made them go through every tedious step the same way they had made me. But then I thought about all those years. All those times I had bent myself backward, twisted myself into knots for a scrap of gratitude. And I knew exactly what to do. I wrote back, short and polite, "Thank you for thinking of me. Unfortunately, I'm currently not accepting family-related clients. I wish you the best in finding the right travel agent for your needs." I sent it and closed my laptop with a satisfied click. In the end, my revenge wasn't anger. It wasn't shouting matches or slammed doors. It was removing myself from their reach. It was living a life so full, so rich, that they couldn't touch it anymore. It was becoming someone who no longer needed their crumbs because I had learned how to bake whole loaves for myself. And the most satisfying part? I knew they would feel the loss. Maybe not all at once. Maybe not loudly. But in the quiet moments when the trip plans fell apart, when the tickets got mixed up, when the guide didn't speak English, they would feel it. The empty space where I used to be. The empty space that only true respect and real love could ever hope to fill. And I wouldn't be there to fix it for them. Not anymore.